My name is Sam Davis, and I was a drug addict long before I ever picked up the first drink or the drug. And I can understand how a lot of people may not understand that. But you got to remember, and it's going to be easier for you to understand addiction if you know this, that it's never about the what, it's always about the why. When I was a little child, from the time I could talk until I was 8 years old, I stuttered like Porky Pig. I couldn't hardly put a sentence together. And I can remember feeling like I just didn't fit. I remember feeling so uncomfortable where my feet were planted. I always wanted to be older than I was. I always wanted to be somewhere else rather than where I was. I was never okay being me. And then at 10 years old, I was molested. And certainly nothing to laugh about there. And certainly doesn't help the self esteem. And I remember walking down the hall after that happened going, how could I let this happen? And that just piled on to this feeling that I had about myself that I'm just not okay. I'm damaged goods. So I started forming these stage characters. Lost my authenticity, and I became this sort of a chameleon. I could be whoever you needed me to be, whoever I thought that you thought I should be, but I was never myself. 12 years old, I'm related to everybody on my road damn near. I'm from a rural area, Southern Virginia. And, we got family all up and down the road that I lived on. And my cousins and I were in my family's Christmas tree farm one afternoon, and one of my cousins pulled out a joint. Now, mind you, at this point, I'm still coming to the table feeling like I don't measure up, like I'm not a part of, I'm separate from. Don't feel connection, don't feel connected. One of my cousins fires up that joint and passes it around, and it came to me, and I hit it, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. Made me feel okay. Certainly, I laughed and ate Cheetos, and we had a big time, but I felt a part of. I felt connected. I felt like I was laughed with instead of laughed at. And my mind remembered that, and my mind said, this works. This is what you've been missing. For the first time in my life, I was really comfortable in my own skin. It's not like I went on to harder stuff immediately after that, or I got high every day. I just went along and did what I guess normal kids do. But as we went along and entered high school, I remember never feeling like I fit in the school. And I was in a private school. I was the only one there with a mullet, T-shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and the Reebok shoes and the acid wash jeans, while everyone else at that school had on Ozods and button-up shirts and short haircuts. And I felt like I just didn't belong. I could get along with everybody, but I felt like if you really knew me, you wouldn't like me. That if you really knew me, you were going to go the other direction. So I didn't really feel like I fit in at that school. So I went to my mom and dad. I'm like, man, I want to go to public school. I'll be all right. If I can just do this, then. If I can just go here, then I'll be all right. If I could just do this, then I'll be all right. If I just had that, then I'd be all right. Started a pattern with me, and it continued on until I sobered up at 36 years old of if I can just get this, then I'll be all right. So I went to public school, and guess what? I wasn't all right. I didn't feel like I found my tribe there. Again, I could get along with everybody, but I didn't feel connected to anybody. And it really had nothing to do with the school. It had nothing to do with the people. It was all about me and the belief systems that I had formed about myself as a young child. Because you've got to remember, a child, when their brain is being programmed at 1,000,000 clicks a second, we're like little narcissists. Everything's about us. It's never about the other person. When I was being picked on for stuttering, I never thought about the other people. I never thought, hey, what's wrong with them? It was always, hey, what's wrong with me? When I got molested at 10 years old, it was never about, hey, what's wrong with that individual? It was about what's wrong with me. Why am I faulty? Why am I not okay? I'm so different. I don't amount to much. After the sexual abuse, I had to walk around and I felt this need to prove to the world that I wasn't gay, to prove to the world that I was a real man. So I established this stage character about myself, to fight at the drop of a hat and always combative, and was just operating in a manner that was not authentic to me at all. So I lost sight, and I really never knew at that time who the real Sam was. I never knew that. But I graduated high school barely, and I went to work for the family business. My dad had always said I'd never work for the family business until I had a 4-year degree. He gave in and gave me an opportunity and gave me a job, and I took to it. We were in the timber business, sawmills, forestry, logging. I really took to it. It played into that stage character that I was, that, hey, this is what real men do. And my cousin had gotten married. And I'm looking at him and I'm going, you know what? I'd like to get me one of those. That's what I need. I need a wife. That's it. So the next girl I went out with, the next girl I dated, 6 months later, we were engaged and we got married. And I'll never forget this. I always say I married alcoholically because she had no idea who I was, except she knew the stage character that I presented, but she had no idea who I was. And I had no clue who she was. All I know is that I wanted my life to resemble my cousin's because it looked like that he was having a good time and I wanted that. I'm like, yeah, that'll fix me. Let's get in a relationship. And not only that, let's get married. And I'll never forget this. We went on the honeymoon, and on the way back, I'm looking at her. I'm looking out the windshield, and I look back over at her, and my eyes are getting a little bigger. I'm looking out the windshield, and I look over at her again, and I look out the other window, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, what have I done? I can't take her home. She's got to go home with me. Like, what have I done? Like, oh my God. So, I make the best of it, but, they say selfishness, self-centeredness is the root of our trouble, and I believe that to be so. An addicted individual is selfish and self-centered to the core. It's all about us. It's never about anyone else. I had no idea what it meant to be in a relationship, no clue what it meant to be in a healthy relationship at all. It was all about me. She had entered my world. Never once did I ask her what she wanted to be in life. Never once did I ask her what her hopes and dreams were. Never once was I supportive to her on her journey. Example of that is I came home from work one day and I stopped and bought this giant boat. I had no business with this boat whatsoever at all. I didn't ask her opinion on that. It was all me. I left work. I went by the boat dealer and pull into the driveway with this huge boat. The truck would barely pull it. I'd never had a boat before, so instead of starting off with a little skiff or maybe a little fishing boat, I come back with a cabin cruiser. The truck wouldn't hardly pull it. And I pull in the driveway expecting her to be all excited and happy and, oh my God, let's go boating. She was in tears. She was crying when she walked outside and saw what I'd brought home. Never once did I consider her. Never honored one vow, and we almost killed each other. I was a very difficult individual to be in a relationship with. But if you looked at my outsides, they looked good. My outsides looked great. I had the land, I had the toys, I had the beautiful wife. I had things. I was relatively good looking. So to look at me, you would think, man, he's doing okay. Inside, I was trash. My insides were total garbage. And they talk about addiction being a chronic, progressive, fatal illness. And I think the progressiveness of it is that we have this internal condition called pain, emotional pain, trauma, what have you. And that's planted in us. And it grows and it manifests into selfishness, self-centeredness. Sometimes in some people, it manifests into workaholic. It manifests into toxic relationships. It manifests into body image issues where you're constantly rearranging your face and getting surgeries. People can even take exercise to the extreme, all to treat this internal condition. Some of us go to drugs and alcohol, and I was one of those. I found out later that weed really wasn't doing it anymore. It wasn't putting me where I needed to be because my internal illness had gotten larger. The pain had gotten larger. So cocaine did the trick for a while. And what cocaine did for me was made me check out. I know a lot of people, they do a little cocaine and they're, at the club and, they're having fun and they're drinking more and they're laughing. And I went straight into isolation. I went straight into paranoia. Before too long of doing cocaine, straight to paranoia. Didn't pass go. I didn't collect $200. I went straight from no coke to paranoia. And my mind started to lie to me at this point. And what I mean by that is I started to be unable to differentiate the truth from the false when it came to cocaine and other drugs. I don't have an experience that showed me that I was going to go to the club with my shirt unbuttoned and I was going to sit at the bar and I was going to have a good time and I was going to have all these dancers around me and I was going to be the life of the party and I was going to be able to do a little blow and get away with it. I don't have an experience that shows me that. My head would tell me that every time before I did cocaine, that I was going to get this little bit of coke and I was going to do this and I was going to go enjoy myself. I never had that experience. My experience showed me that when I did cocaine, that I was going to end up in the Motel 6 laying in between the beds to keep from the, the gunshots coming through the window, or, I'm back in the woods, backed into the bushes to keep the shadow people away from me. That was what my experience showed me. But my head told me that, hey, you're going to do a little blow and life's going to be great. So I was without defense against buying a lie, what my mind told me, right? So when you look at addiction, you have to understand we have a threefold illness. It's mind, body, spirit. Bodily, like I don't have an experience that shows me that I can just do one line of cocaine. My mind tells me I can, though. So bodily, when I put the substance in my system, it sets off this craving that's beyond my control. Like I can say I'm just going to do one, but once it hits my system, I want more. It's beyond my control. I am going to do more. I remember going to the drug dealer many times with my bill money in this pocket, my play money in that pocket, and telling the drug dealer, say, man, just give me a 20. That's all I want. Even the drug dealer was like, man, why don't you go on and buy a quarter because you're coming back. I'm like, no, sir. No, I'm not. Just a 20. That's all I want. My mind was telling me, you just do just a 20, even though I don't have an experience that shows me that I can. So I'd pull that $20 out of my play money, get a 20, go back in the woods, do my thing. Next thing you know, back at the dealer. The next thing you know, my play money and my bill money is gone. My guns are gone. My car's gone. My belongings are gone. Family heirlooms are gone. Respect in the community is gone. This whirlwind and this tornado just got larger and larger. My family, being the great enablers that they were, they continued to employ me. They thought that I was a gentleman addict, if there ever was such a thing. I don't even know if that exists, but they thought that I was a gentleman addict. And they just felt like if they could just, keep their eye on me and keep me close, that I'd be all right. Marriage was a disaster at this time, but we figured, hey, what can fix that? A kid. Nothing more I wanted in this world than to be a good dad. I wanted to be a good son. I wanted to be a good brother. I wanted to be a good husband. I wanted to be a productive member of society, but I was struggling to pull off any of it. I'll never forget when she went into labor. Now, I was eating a lot of opiates at this time, a lot of pills, and this is before they were stamped. These were like real pills. Man, I'd have to eat 10 pills in order to just get out of bed in the morning. Like, I didn't care what was going on at my job, what was going on in my family, what was going on in my life. I had to have opiates before I was even going to get out of bed. I didn't care. I didn't care what was happening. I'm buying pills off the street. I'm buying pills from these connections that I had. And, my wife's out here pregnant. And I keep telling myself, man, I'm going to be all right once this kid is born. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to do right once she has this baby. I'm going to be a good dad. But I'm going to party up until that point. She went into labor. And, again, we're selfish and self-centered when we're in active addiction. And I was like, man, there's no way I can go to this hospital and hang out here without having some pills. There's just no way that can happen. So I had her in my vehicle, and we were headed to the hospital. And I'm like, you know what? Look, we're just going to need to make this little detour because I got to get some pills. And the good codependent that she was like, okay, all right, we'll be okay. And she's in pain. She's in labor. Contractions are happening. It's like, no, I'm all right. We'll be okay. Like, go do your thing. So I had to go like 45 minutes out the way to get some pills so I would be all right in the hospital while this miraculous event of childbirth is unfolding before my eyes. The only thing I can think of is I got to have some pills. And then in the delusion that once the kid was born, once my baby was born, that I was going to be able to snap out of it and be all right, even though I don't have an experience that shows me that I had ever been able to pull that off. My mind tells me, yeah, you'll be able to get out of this. Once your son's born, you'll be all right. You'll get it together. Watching my son being born, I'll never forget it. I was so proud. That's a love that those of you that don't have kids, you just haven't experienced. The depth of the love that you feel for your child when you watch it being born. And I swore then that I was going to be a good dad, that I was going to do right, that I wasn't going to eat any more pills, that I wasn't going to spend any more money in drugs. And I had these grand ideas of what a great father I was going to be. And I loved that baby with all of my heart. So the want to be a good father, the want to be a good productive member of society, and the want to not be a drug addict was there. The willingness to do anything about it was not. So I continue on this downward spiral, looking at my son as he's growing. I'm holding him, watching. He's sleeping on my chest as I'm watching TV and thinking, man, why can't I just be okay? And then I remember watching Seinfeld. Now, Seinfeld was one of the greatest comedy shows of all time, in my personal opinion. And I'm sitting there watching them, and tears are rolling down my face because I'm watching people on TV just doing normal things and having fun and having connections and then seemingly enjoying themselves. And I'm crying. I'm watching this show and I'm crying, going, why can't I pull that off? Like, why can't I have that? I know that I was created to be something much different than this. Why can't I get out of my own way? What the hell is going on with me? So after a while, this thing gets worse and worse. And at this point, cocaine, pills, the wife is gone, kid's gone. I'm in the house. If you drove by the house, you'd be like, oh, that's a nice piece of property. That's a nice home. Inside, there was no refrigerator. There was no washer. There was no dryer. There was no stove because I had told myself that I'm switching the home over to gas. As far as they don't even make a gas refrigerator. I know they don't make a gas washing machine. But I had told myself that I'm going to switch the home over to gas. So I had to get rid of all the appliances. Place looked like a dumpster on the inside. And I'm lying on the sofa one night just looking like 150 pounds of chewed bubble gum, and I got a big fat joint in my hand, watching this little bitty little TV that's sitting on top of the big TV that no longer works, and my family walks in the door. I didn't even try to. I was in my tighty-whitey underwear, too. So picture that, if you will. A grown man laying on the sofa, stoned out of his mind in his tighty-whitey underwear, and his mom and dad roll in. They looked at me with such disgust and shock and just pity. And they're like, man, you got to do something about this. I said, you know what? You're right. And at the time, I had owed the drug dealers a little bit of money, so I figured, hey, what the hell? I need to get out of here and go to rehab. And I can tell you that I had the want to not be a drug addict. I had the want to be a good father. I had the want to do right, but I didn't have the willingness. And my family didn't really know what to do. And you got to be careful out here when you're trying to pick, addiction treatment centers. They'll tell you anything in the world to get you in the door. And this program out in the western part of the state where I'm from told my family that they were one of the top 5 in the country. And that was the biggest load of horse crap I'd ever heard in my life. Even when I walked in the door there, knowing as little as I knew about drug treatment, that this was not the top 5 place in the country. That I can assure you. So I go into this treatment center, and I have the want to do differently, but I didn't have really the willingness to do the deep work necessary to achieve sobriety. And I'm the kind of guy that when you take drugs and alcohol out of my system, the next thing I'm going to want to make myself feel better on the inside is going to be the opposite sex. And I'm going to find one just as crazy as I am. And off we're going to go to get each other well. See, I needed any sort of distraction that I could find to take the focus off of this horrible internal condition that I was feeling. This feeling of just uselessness, this gripped with these deep-seated fears, the fear of being alone, the fear of change, the fear of the unknown, the fear of being disrespected, just operating out of all these fears, this low self-esteem, this low self-worth. Drugs and alcohol treated that for a long time. It did. It worked. It worked. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. And then it started turning on me like a boomerang and cutting me to pieces. And I ended up in treatment, just like I was saying. I never got any work done in there because I was easily distracted as soon as I walked in the door by the opposite sex. My insurance kicked out after about 2 weeks, and my family's like, hey, we'll pay for you to stay longer. But they were leaving the decision up to me, an individual that's insane. And yes, it's insanity. I was insane. And my most insane thought and decision happened when I was sober. Given the horrific consequences of my use, I was losing my kid, I was losing my wife, I'd lost all my belongings. Given the consequences of my use in a stone cold sober state of mind, I made a decision to get more. So my family made a big mistake by allowing me to call the shots when I'm still very much in my insanity. So I left that treatment center thinking I had it all together, and within 2 days I was smoking crack again. Kept it from my family for a little while, but that didn't last long because people know when I smoke crack cocaine. Like, it's hard for me to hide crack cocaine. When I'm smoking crack, you're going to know it. I bottomed out again, and at this point, you know, the entire community knows what's going on. People start to distance themselves from me. Dust won't even settle around me anymore. Stray dogs go the other way. Like, people really wanted to avoid Sam. Ended up back in that treatment program again, hooking up with females for that distraction, which is a very selfish thing to do because not only am I taking myself out of treatment, I'm taking someone else out of treatment as well. I'm taking another human being, another suffering, struggling human being, and I'm distracting them from their treatment. It's a very selfish thing to do. Come out of treatment, same thing. It's just rinse and repeat, man. This cycle kept going over and over again. And the consequences started piling up. I started driving without a license, getting caught, started writing bad checks. I remember this store in my hometown. I had the idea several times when I went in that store. And man, I would never steal anything from anybody. I was raised right. There were several times that I pulled into the parking lot of that store, that service station, thinking, how can I get in there and rob them and get away with this? Even knowing that I wouldn't get away with it, the thought crossed my mind of, how can I get in here, rob this store, and get away with it long enough to smoke all the money up that I got? You know, I'm not a very violent guy, but I'm operating out of this fear. Remember, from this belief system that I had made with myself, that what a real man is and how a real man shows up. And you know, I had run around on my wife many, many times. I didn't honor not a single vow of our relationship or of a marriage. And you know, she did the same thing to me. And it was all good when I was the one doing it. Try to let it go. You know, I'm like, I'm just going to let this go. Let it go. By this point, I was going to the methadone clinic. You know, I went into the treatment center with an opiate addiction, and they said, you need to go to the methadone clinic. That's what you need, Sam. That'll fix you right up. So now I'm a slave to this methadone clinic where I have to get up and drive to about an hour every day and stand in line and get methadone. And I'm doing cocaine on top of that, and been up all night doing cocaine, and had to get to the methadone clinic, and then had to go to work in the woods, by the way, you know, with very dangerous equipment. And I stop at this gas station. Before I left the house, you know, it looked like something off of Leave It to Beaver. You know, I'm kiss my wife on the cheek, I kiss my son on his forehead, and I say, I'll see y'all later. And I'm off to the methadone clinic. Stop at this gas station, and I see the guy across from me at the pump, the guy that had ran around with my wife. Alcoholics and drug addicts don't deal with resentment very well. We just don't have the ability to let things go. And I had this power saw that we used to cut down the big trees that the machines couldn't cut. And it was a brand new saw, still had the green link, master link on the chain. And I lost it. Like, I'd been up all night anyway and was, you know, foggy from methadone and going to get more methadone. And I pulled that saw out of the back of my truck, and I walked around to that man, and, you know, I perceived that he had smirked at me. I took that as a disrespect, and I seriously doubt he did any of that. He was just going on about his life. And I fired that saw up and chunked it through the window at him and tried to kill him. Like, I did my best for about 5 minutes to kill that man. I dove out the window and I chased him around. I'm talking about, this is broad daylight. 9 o'clock in the morning, broad daylight on a 4-lane highway in my community. People that I know are at the next gas pumps getting gas. People trying to go about their day, and I'm chasing a man around the parking lot with a chainsaw like a crazy person. And I realized that I was going to be late to the methadone clinic, so I put my saw away, got in my truck, and left. A few minutes later, my dad called and said, "Son, what in the hell are you doing?" He said, "Every cop in the state is looking for you." I said, "Man, I didn't do anything. I was in such delusion. I felt justified in what I did, and I thought it was no big deal." Went on to the clinic. I was late. So when you're late to the methadone clinic, they lock the door. You're not going to get dosed. And I knew that if I didn't get dosed, that I was going to be sick. And I knew that there was a slim chance of me going to jail that day, or at least getting arrested. I was in delusion thinking that maybe I'd just get a ticket. I went back to my hometown and went and turned myself in. You know, they weren't happy with me. The police treated me a little bit differently that day. They threw me against the wall, handcuffed me, and off to jail I went. There's a feeling you get when you walk into the jail and they put you in a cell with about 60, 70 other people, and they slam that door behind you, and there's not a doorknob on your end. That's a weird feeling. That's a that's a wake up right there. Cold turkey withdrew from methadone, sleeping on my boot in Piedmont Regional Jail. And I couldn't have fought my way out of a wet paper bag during methadone detox. Anyone that goes through methadone detox can attest to this, that you're not on the top of your game. So physically, I couldn't have fought my way out of a wet paper bag, but my mouth still worked. And I was in such delusion that I was just this badass that I would just run my mouth. And you know, there's thing I found out in jail is it doesn't matter how good you think you can fight. There's a lot of people in jail that can fight better than you, that aren't scared to fight you.